Hi, and welcome to PlanStrongerTV. I'm your host, David Holland. Widows, women, and their money. That is the subject of today's program. I'm so glad you're joining us. Joining me also on the program will be Kathleen Rehl, a certified financial planner. We're going to talk about the steps that women need to take to be prepared when they are a widow. Stay tuned. Welcome back. So I'm going to tell you something that is very important to me. In the work I do, helping people with their finances, I derive a lot of satisfaction from seeing people get from where they are to where they need to be, both with couples, single, and with people who are widowed or a widower. And because I do a lot of work with pre-retirees and retirees, I probably do a little more than maybe the average advisor in terms of that type of work, working with people who are making that transition to being maybe on their own. And so in doing that work, there are some special things that we need to do to make sure that the plans are in place so that when that person, if it's the woman or the man, that when they're on their own, their financial house is in order, that they got all the proper documents in place from an estate planning standpoint, that everything's going where it's supposed to go, that their needs will be met, both in terms of their lifestyle, but also with long-term care, and then other needs they may have, and then also when they're done with it, it goes to where it's supposed to go for the next generation, or charities, or whatever the case may be. Along the way, I've met other advisors and other professionals. One of them, Kathleen Rehl, is a certified financial planner, and she has specialized in working with widows, and she's been on her own personal crusade to educate women about the issues surrounding being a widow, financially as well as emotionally. And then also, she's worked with advisors and trained them. So I consider myself a bit of a disciple of Kathleen in the work that she's done. She's written a book. I actually got a case of them and give them out to my clients. So I'm excited to talk with Kathleen today on the program. Let's get to it. Welcome back. So on today's program, I'm very excited to bring into the studio with me Kathleen Rehl. I have to confess to Kathleen, who is here in the studio. Welcome, Kathleen. Good to have you with me. I have to confess, I'm the president of your fan club. You don't know that. Woohoo! So let me properly introduce Kathleen to the audience. Kathleen Rehl is a certified financial planner. She's also a PhD and a certified financial transitionalist, which we'll be talking about. And Kathleen's, really her mission has been, of the last 20-some years, she has worked with widows and helping them prepare for and help them transition and work with their finances. So again, thank you, Kathleen, for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, I've been a fan, all kidding aside, because I admire your work working with widows. And Kathleen's also the author of the book, Moving Forward on Your Own, a financial guide for widows. And I got a case of your book, and I hand those out to my clients who are going through that transition in their life. So let's dig in and talk about the things that you've done and the work you've done with women. And I guess to start, the thing that really drew me to you, and you and I have had an opportunity to talk before when I was doing radio, that drew me to wanting to have you on the program is your own personal story. So for our viewing audience, share a little bit about your story leading up to the work that you've done, and we'll talk then about some of the things you've done since then.
Yeah, my widow's journey has really been going on for the past decade. And it was a couple of days before Valentine's Day that my life changed forever. That was a decade ago. That's when my husband died in my arms. And the initial grief that I personally experienced, and it impacted me mentally, physically, socially, even financially. But it was shortly after I started coming out of that grief that I realized that, oh my gosh, what about my widowed sisters that
Right.
don't have some of the background that I do? And I knew that I wanted to help them. And so that was the beginning of writing the book, Moving Forward on Your Own. And actually writing that book helped with my own personal healing in helping other widows.
Yeah.
And so then I moved into the second stage of widowhood, which was that growth phase. And then after that, I started speaking, and I was invited to speak and teach and write more about this. And so when I retired from my financial planning business, after doing that for 17 years, then I decided to start my encore career because I
Okay.
wasn't really ready to hang it up yet.
Yeah. Still lots to do.
So yeah, I'm 70 years old, but I'm having a good time writing and speaking and teaching and actually doing research about widows and their financial issues because there's very little research being done right now.
And I know you've got some
yeah.
great research and statistics you've done. I think the thing that's really interesting and so insightful and helpful, I think, for our viewers and for other women is that you actually were a financial planner already in the financial world before you had this transition and your husband passed. But for a lot of women, they're not financial planners. They're not certified financial planners. So when this event happens, and I know you've got statistics you can share of how often this occurs, their whole world is turned upside down, financially, emotionally. Everything changes. For you, you had already had the financial piece kind of nailed down, but it was still a major transition for you to make.
Oh, I know. It was like in the initial days, I mean, I thought I was going crazy. I couldn't remember things, couldn't remember where I put my car keys. I was filling out a form and I didn't know my social security number one day. But there's research that shows that cognitively, things really happen to a woman who's in early grief. I mean, there are certain parts of the body, like our heartbeat, our blood flow, our body temperature, that stays the same. But the higher cognitive thinking skills, right out the window.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So if a woman is in that initial grief, that crushing grief, and doesn't have a clue about the finances, that's a double whammy.
Well, then it's time for time out,
Yeah,
right? Because,
yeah.
I mean, a lot of times people feel compelled to do something quickly, sell the home, make financial changes. They're trying to listen, or they're, whether they want to
Yeah.
or not, they're being bombarded by a lot of
Yeah.
people wanting to
Yeah,
help.
relatives and friends, and like, okay, you can't live here anymore probably, you're gonna sell the house. No, so they're making decisions.
Right,
way
or sell
late.
this, buy that, change your finances all around.
Yeah.
You're already dealing with the emotional aspects and all this disruption and change, and you're going to make all those changes too?
Yeah, life insurance comes in, gotta invest that right away, and some mistakes can be made. And
Yeah, and you've got to share the statistic for our audience, Kathleen.
oh,
This
yeah.
is so compelling.
Yeah.
The percentages of men and women and how they spend their final years.
yeah. I think one of the biggest ones, and I'll make this point to the audience, is that 80% of all women are going to die alone. But 80% of all men die married. Now, the ones who die alone are either widowed, they're divorced, or they've never been married. 70% of all married women are going to experience widowhood during their lifetime, and the average age that a wife becomes a widow is 59 and a half.
Wow.
I was actually just a couple months past my 60th birthday. In fact, on my 60th birthday, I was sitting in a cancer center, and my husband was getting a chemo treatment at that point.
Wow.
So, and some people say, 59 and a half, that can't be. But I typically speak at, it's a conference for widowed women every year, and at age 70, I'm the oldest widow there. A lot of women are in their
Wow.
20s and 30s and 40s. These are women, like, think active line of duty. They're, in the military. They're firefighters, they're policemen. They were in accidents. And a lot of those women are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So you average that together with women who are my age, and you get 59 and a half.
That's
years old.
remarkable. I know that the Army has used your book as part of
Yes.
their training for survivors.
In their Survivor Outreach Service program. Worldwide, they use it. So
Well,
that's-
here's a big thing for the women who are watching this program and for the men, quite candidly. The statistic you cited that some 70, 80% of women are going to die a widow, what does that then mean for their finances today if they're married or if they're not? But what does that mean today? What should they be thinking about and being involved and participating?
Yeah, and another statistic with that is that a widow may live like another 15 years on her own. And so that's handling the finances as well as everything else that's out there.
A lot of my clients are retired, and so just to be candid, we deal a lot with this, and
Sure.
I'm very pleased to report to you, Kathleen, because you're the person who's really focused on this, and I feel like I'm one of your disciples because I'm pleased to report to you that very few women that we work with end up going and doing something else. But you've got another statistic that a large percentage of women actually will change advisors.
Fire 'em.
Fire 'em.
It's like 70%. The advisor that they work with their hubby, they're out of there after they're gone. And why is that? Why is that? It might be like Anne, who came to me after her husband died, and she said, I got a phone call that I needed to come in and sign some paperwork. And she said, I really didn't know him very well. He had a relationship with my husband. He got his hot tips on the golf course playing, and I really wasn't interested in all that stuff. So I came into the office, and the first thing he said was that I should be happy because I was beating the market. And he had all these charts and these graphs, and she said, I never understood him before, and I really didn't understand them then. And Kathleen, he didn't even mention my husband's name. He just kept calling him my deceased spouse. And I started to cry.
Wow.
And he said, oh, don't worry your pretty little head about this. We're going to take care. He did. He said, we're going to take care of everything for you. And she said, Kathleen, that just didn't sit very well with me.
Imagine not.
And I just left. And his secretary called me the next day and tried to set up an appointment. And I said, I was busy. I had something else to do. And that's when I talked to my friend Betty. And Betty said, you were so helpful after her husband died. And so that's why I'm here. Am I going to be okay, Kathleen? Can I still live in my house? Do I have to go back to work? Can I still help my granddaughter with her
basic questions.
college? And she said, none of the other advisor didn't get it. He just thought beating the market, that was the highest goal.
All about the investments.
No, not about the investments. Didn't care about where she was really, didn't understand her grief. And so she was part of that statistics. And not only she left, but her money left with her.
Right. So this seems like an extreme example of what you're sharing, but this is a pretty
that's very typical.
Common, very typical.
Very, very typical.
So the next obvious question then is to avoid having to, because that's not a pleasant thing, having to uproot your finances while you're going through that, difficult mourning period.
Yes.
What should women be doing to make sure that she and her husband are working with an advisor that she can work with on her own if he's not there?
Yeah, that is so important to have that safety net, if you will, lined up. And as a couple that came to me when both of them were still just fine, and the husband said, I'm here mainly because I want my wife to learn about this stuff. He said, she says it's boring, that we don't need to talk about it, that I do such a great job on it, but I want her to learn about it. And this was, they were both fine, and we worked together for 3 years, and we did some fun things. She started learning. She was actually interested in this stuff. And then he began going downhill. It was almost like he had a premonition, and he developed Alzheimer's.
Wow.
And then he eventually passed. But she continued on with me as a client, but she had no lack of confidence that our partnership was secure and that it was going to be okay. Because,
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, and you talk, I know in your book, and also you and I have had other conversations where we talk about the importance of not making any big decisions while you're in this major state of flux and grieving and this transition. But if you have already a relationship with your financial planner or advisor and you have a financial plan, it's okay to continue on and execute that plan and know the things that need to be done so you're not having to start from scratch.
Yeah, and that don't rush.
Yeah.
And if she already is with a planner, there's nothing that needs to be done immediately. It's
not right away.
It's like taking care of herself, because widows early on, we are impacted by like health situations. A lot of them aren't sleeping well.
Sure.
They're not eating well.
You may have been spending a couple weeks in the hospital.
Yes. And so being with family, surrounding yourself with loving girlfriends, and just not rushing. There's certain, you got to have the funeral, obviously, and if there are death benefits, they can be filed for, but you don't have to run around and invest them right away. They can just be parked. In fact, a lot of life insurance proceeds, the companies have a little side account. You can put them in, and it's earning 3%, which is actually more than money market's paying right now, until you really decide what their goals are, because it's a new life ahead. And in fact, some of those investments will probably change. They will, because it was for a couple, and now she's an individual on her own.
Yeah.
And also in that, like, not rushing, because unfortunately, there are financial sharks out there.
There are.
That
Sad.
take advantage of widows because they know that they're in this emotional chaos. They may not have had a relationship with someone. They don't know. My aunt was a perfect example of this. She was sold, this is like egregious, she was sold Iraqi dinars. Well, that's the currency of Iraq by this charlatan. It was a scam artist, really.
Yeah.
But a nephew of a friend of hers from church came to town. She had a little tea. She introduced her girlfriend, said he had a great investment. And he convinced several of those widowed ladies to cash out CDs and invest in Iraqi dinars. So.
See, Kathleen, that's why I do what I do, and I
Yeah.
know that's why you've done what you've done, is to try to help widows and both men and women, but help protect them from some of these people that just, either they know exactly what they're doing or they don't know what they're doing, and they don't do a good job for people. But the importance of not having to make any quick decisions is so just critical.
Yeah.
Relax, take care of yourself first.
Yeah, nothing, those like decisions like filing for benefits and you can start getting, like there's a section in the book about getting organized, get your papers together that you'll need with the attorney, with the accountant, with the financial advisor.
Those are all critical things. To the women, again, who are viewing this program and they're not involved, what do they say? What do they say to their husbands? What do they say in that couple relationship? You know, I'm not involved. What do you say to them to get involved? What should they do?
Oh, and as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about, there was a luncheon that I attended, and it was shortly after the book was published, and we were sitting at a table. There were two couples and myself. And the lady's looking at me, she's looking at me, and she said, "Oh, I know who you are. I know who you are. I read about you in the Tampa Tribune paper. You wrote that book for widows." I said, "Well, I'm never going to need to read that book because Henry," and she's pointing to her husband, "he takes care of everything for us. Don't you, Henry?" And I'm looking at Henry, and he's, kind of, okay. And she said, "And we've got a deal, don't we, honey?" And I said, "Okay, what's this deal?" And she said, "I get to die first. Isn't that right?" And I'm looking at Henry, and Henry's got a walker, and he looks older than she is, but it was just absolute denial. She said, "Sometimes Henry says, we need to talk about these things. Like, we need to talk about what's in the safety deposit box. We need to talk about our beneficiaries. We need to talk about why I've invested." And she said, "That's boring." I tell him, "I'm going to go play with the grandkids," or "I've got a hair appointment."
She tells him not to worry his pretty little head about it.
Yes. So we used to do it at an event when I was a planner, and it was like, it was a social gathering, and it was in the month of Valentine's, and it was along the line of saying "I love you" means sharing the financial information.
Excellent.
Okay. What's in the safe deposit box? What are our passwords and PINs? Are the beneficiaries on the life insurance correct? Oh, one widow came to me, and it was heartbreaking. They had 3 life insurance policies. 2 of them we had no problem collecting the benefits on. The third one we couldn't collect because his ex-wife was the beneficiary from 20 years ago. And the widow said, maybe he really meant to leave her that money. And I know it was just an oversight.
Well, you know what, Kathleen, we're only going to be able to scratch the surface today on some of these things, but I applaud what you're doing. It's wonderful work. You've given so much to the financial industry, so much to your clients, and I know you're teaching other advisors now, and so I'm so glad we could be here together to do this, and of course our viewers will be definitely wanting to look for more. So thank you very much, Kathleen, for being with me today.
Thank you for inviting me to be on PlanStronger.
You're welcome. Okay, viewer question. So this question actually comes from Dennis Miller, who's been on this program, and Dennis and I are friends and kind of co-conspirators in trying to help people understand finances. Dennis writes a newsletter called Miller on the Money, and he recently called me to interview me for his newsletter, which is kind of cool. So, but I invite you to write me and ask me questions that I can answer on the program. But it was really a great opportunity to share with Dennis and his readers with his newsletter about a couple of things that have been talked about quite a bit recently. And one of them is robo-advisors. If you've heard that term, robots, robo-advisors, computers managing your portfolios, and how allegedly they can do a better job or do an equivalent job without as much cost. You know, better, stronger, cheaper, faster, right? That's what everything's always about. Well, Dennis posed a few questions to me, not only about robo-advisors and how that might be used to manage people's money, but also a little bit about Social Security and how the computer is telling us what the ideal day or date of when to take Social Security for a particular person's situation, and also how to take it. So I'll share with you a couple of the questions that Dennis asked me. I think they're really interesting. One of them is, what do I think about robo-advisors in general? And my short answer to you is that the computers don't need to be running the asylum. The computers don't need to be running the investments. They can help. We use computers in my office. And when I say that, everybody uses computers in their offices, but when I say that, I mean computers help us with, and the software help us with running different analyses to do analysis of a person's portfolio. They can help us with building a portfolio, but we don't turn it over to the computer and say, okay, manage a portfolio. Judgment is required. The computer can crunch the numbers, they can make our job easier, but we're still going to make the decisions about how to manage the money. The same is true about Social Security. There's no computer software on the planet or robo-advisor that can factor in all the different things that should be factored in into making a recommendation to someone on when they take Social Security. So, for example, a computer software can calculate the optimal, ideal time at which to draw Social Security. But the computer can't factor in your history of longevity in your family and your current health and your view of your health and how you view Social Security and whether it's going to be around. They can't take into account all those things and then consider also all the financial products that are out there and how they might be used for your particular situation, how an investment or mutual funds or a bond or an annuity or a reverse mortgage or cash in the bank, or how all those things might be woven together and considered to determine when to draw Social Security. Okay, so the computer can't do that. It can't sense how you feel about those different things and about waiting on drawing on Social Security later, which is what a lot of the software will tell us that that's better. Well, yeah, the longer you wait drawing Social Security, the better it gets, but it can't hear you. It can't see you, at least not today. Maybe 100 years from now, the computer can answer the question, but in the meantime, a human needs to answer that question. One more thing before you go. So when somebody becomes a widow or widower, friends and family want to help, especially family. It's great, but remember that family may or may not have the financial expertise to help you. They can be supportive, they can go with you to meetings with financial professionals, they can be there, but they themselves are not necessarily a financial expert. I had a situation one time where a couple had been a client of mine and one of them passed away. Family came in, well-intending, and wanted to help mom with what to do with the money. They made some decisions without me, didn't really consult us, but very wisely, the wife, the widow, double-checked the kids' recommendations with us before she pulled the trigger. Actually, she had pulled the trigger, they had sent the paperwork in, but it was bothering her, so she said, I want to ask David just to make sure. I looked at what they had done, and again, well-intending, but it was almost exactly the opposite of what had been done, or should have been done. So, gotta love family, and I think it's wonderful for family to step in and help you with all the other stuff, but when something happens and there are financial decisions to be made, double check, and if you're not working with an advisor, double check with an advisor. It's worth paying somebody for some of their time to guide you and make sure that the decisions you make, which some of them may be irrevocable, And they may be, once they're done, they're done. And they may have lasting consequences. Just double check. And if you do that, you will plan stronger.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.